good feel for kind of an innate immune response. This innate response we talked about here is an inflammatory response. It's not specific. We don't know what bacteria are present on that piece of wood. It penetrates the skin, the body goes into this innate response. The innate response recruits innate system cells from the circulatory system. It activates cells that are already present there, like the macrophages. And then as part of this response, you get cells gobbling up lots and lots of bacteria. You also get some secondary things. Fluid moving into the area because of the breaks in the circulatory system. That fluid moving in causes swelling in the area. And it also can cause pain because of that swelling putting pressure on nervous system cells that have pressure-gated sodium channels to tell the brain that there's a problem in that area. And then that redness because the circulatory system fluid has been heated, right? The circulatory system carries warm blood, and that heated fluid moving into the area raises the temperature of that area. Okay, that's all part of what I would call a non-specific inflammatory response. Okay? All right, so innate immunity, anatomical barriers, physiological barriers, and along with the physiological barriers, we have some cellular components, namely the leukocytes. Having all kinds of trouble here. The leukocytes, along with dendritic cells and mast cells, being part of this innate immune system. Okay? Now, the other immune system is much more sophisticated. The innate immune system is in all animals. This other type of immune system, the acquired portion of the immune system, is involved in what we call acquired immunity. And the acquired immunity is basically only present in the vertebrates. It's a very advanced type of immune system that works in conjunction with the innate immune system. Okay? In an acquired immune system, the immune response is enhanced based on previous experience. So it's a specific type. It targets things it's already seen before, and previous exposure is very important for the functioning of this acquired immune system. The idea is I see it once, I acquire an immunity that I can use the next time that I see it. Okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the acquired immune system. So to start this process, let's look at the lymphatic system. I threatened to talk about this again when we were doing digestive system, when we talked about the lacteals, right, and being involved in the lymphatic system. And I said, well, wait on that, we'll come back to it. Well, here we are. So as blood circulates through the circulatory system under pressure, plasma can seep through capillaries. Those fenestrated capillaries, we have the serum from the blood seeping out of the circulatory system. And it ends up in the surrounding tissue. This is the extracellular fluid or interstitial fluid that occurs between cells. Now, this interstitial fluid can return back to the body through the capillary membranes. In other words, under pressure, right, we have the capillary system here. Just trying to draw a decent capillary. So blood comes into this area, and then we get some leakage out because of the fenestrations. That fluid can also come back in through osmosis into the circulatory system, but there's going to be a bunch of it that doesn't. So it's been moved out into the interstitial fluid. What is the fate of this stuff? Well, this fluid that now exists out here, we're going to call lymph. hence lymphatic system. We're talking about what happens to this lymph. So this lymph then can be collected and returned back to the circulatory system. So here, let's take a look here. Everything in kind of this blackish green, I don't know if it shows up as that color with what you're looking at. This is all the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system is composed of these tubes called lymphatic vessels. I almost said lymph vessels, but lymphatic vessels. And if we look at these lymphatic vessels, they look a lot internally like veins. And they look like veins because they have valves. Like the large veins, the movement of blood through the veins is assisted by muscle contraction. As I walk around, that contraction squeezes and forces blood through these one-way valves and veins. A similar thing is happening with the lymphatic system. Me moving around and working all these skeletal muscles helps to squeeze lymph through these one-way valves so that we get the lymph starting out here and collectively coming together with other lymphatic vessels and other lymphatic vessels until we have kind of main tracts, right? Main vessels that are going to return that lymph back to the circulatory system. Okay? All right. The lymphatic vessels are returning the lymph back to the blood via two large ducts that drain into the veins near the shoulders. The largest of these is called the thoracic duct. And the thoracic duct is returning the lymph back to the circulatory system by the left subclavian vein. Okay? So at some point you'll get into anatomy doing stuff, but the left subclavian, think left, it's subclavicle. There's a vein that runs in that area, bringing things back to the vena cava, back to the heart, right? The right atrium. Okay? All right, so we return it back into larger and larger tubes until eventually it gets dumped back into the circulatory system. Now, as we go through these tubes, right, we go through these tubes, periodically throughout this lymphatic system are these things called lymph nodes. So there's a lymphatic vessel, you can see the vein there, another lymphatic vessel with a vein, and the lymph is brought into this lymph node, and then it exits again through other lymphatic vessels. Okay? All right? Okay? Now, lymph nodes are important in immunity. There are all sorts of cell types that hang out in these lymph nodes and basically filter the lymph. And there are lots of cells that are present in these lymph nodes that are kind of looking for things in the lymph. Okay? Collectively, these cells are called lymphocytes. Collectively, these cells are called lymphocytes. These are cells of the lymphatic system with many of them hanging out in these lymph nodes. That seems to be where they do most of their work. Here would be another kind of picture of what this would look like. There are these lymphatic vessels collecting the lymph. They're calling them lymphatic capillaries, right? But they're lymphatic vessels. They connect together and eventually come into larger tubes. These larger tubes, right, bring the lymph into the lymph nodes. And in the lymph node, we would have all these lymphatic cells kind of hanging out, filtering all this lymph, and then the filtered lymph moves out through another lymphatic vessel. We'll use terminology that we've used before. The lymphatic vessels arriving at a lymph node are the afferent lymphatic vessels. And the vessel that leaves a lymph node would be the efferent lymphatic vessel. Okay? Right, the cell types that hang out in these lymph nodes are lymphocytes. I've starred them on my chart. Notice that these cell types were the leukocytes plus the natural killer cells. Now we've got a group of cells here called lymphocytes that also include the natural killer cells. Okay? And the lymphocytes, a few different types of lymphocytes. The first one is what's called a B cell. Okay? Probably better in this case to just list them out, and then we'll start to put together what they do, because they actually interact in quite complicated ways. Along with B cells, there are cell types that B cells can derive into. These are called plasma cells. So B cells can become plasma cells under the appropriate conditions. Then we also have a few different types of T cells. Let's do it this way. T cells. The first type is called a cytotoxic T cell. Cytotoxic T cell. All right. And then the second type of T cell we have here is a TH cell. This is a helper T cell. And then finally, the natural killer cells that we talked about before. In this case, functioning in the acquired immune system, they're similar to T cells, but they're also leukocytes in that they have non-specific activity as well. Okay, just checking my time here. Okay, so what let's do is let's take a little break real quick, and then when we come back, let's try to put these cell types together and have them actually do something. All right, I'll be back in a second.